century. Be a part of a summit of thought leaders and visionaries, shaping the world's future. NDTV World Summit, October 21st and 22nd on the NDTV network.
Presented by
Adani. Powered by Pernod Ricard. Co-powered by GE Aerospace. Supercharged by Charge Zone. Community Empowerment Partner Kamla Ankibai Ghamandiram Govani Trust. Beverage Partner La Cafe. Associate Partner M3M Foundation. State Partner Government of Uttar Pradesh.
You're watching India Market Open. It's Monday morning. Global markets are looking mixed. Of course, the bulls have tried to make a comeback on Friday. We don't know whether that's going to continue. But some amount of resilience is what we're hoping for. Implied Nifty is indicating to a flat start. Yeah. But I think it's in the midst of the earnings season. I think it's a weekend when we've woken up on a Monday with a whole bunch of banking earnings that the street will react to. So Bank Nifty becomes important.
It's very interesting because we're actually looking at a very narrow range for the benchmark indices. Volatility has come off so much, and yet we are looking at a very interesting earnings season. So it's certainly going to be a good one to keep an eye on, Samina.
Indeed, and everyone who's talked about lack of decoupling will be surprised because our markets have been moving in the opposite direction of what global equity markets have been doing. So very quickly, let's take you through all the big triggers that we're tracking early this morning. Like I said, Implied Nifty is trading flat. So there's nothing too exciting on Implied Nifty. Well, we are well below levels of 25,000 as we see it. And it'll be interesting to see if the bulls post-opening try to recoup or recover those levels again. But in terms of global cues that we have this morning, Asian markets are trading mixed. Some are positive, some are trading marginally negative. All eyes will remain on what continues to come out of China. The prime lending rate has been reduced more than expected. So that is a positive trigger, and that is leading to the way some of those Asian markets have been trading this morning. Remember, on Friday as well, China finally gave out that $100 billion cookie, if I may call it, to investors. And that, of course, helped commodities and the Chinese markets do quite well. You had that. Analysts do believe that across Asian markets as well, charts are indicating that those markets are ripe for a period of consolidation. So you want to keep in mind that China closed higher by 3.6% on Friday. What you are seeing this morning is not too bad either for those markets across Asia. Well, other key economic data that you will be tracking from Asia this week is Tokyo's Tokyo's inflation number and South Korea's third quarter GDP. So that's pretty much all you have on tap, along with earnings for Asian equity markets. On Wall Street, the picture was good. Record highs continue to be hit for the Dow and the S&P 500. In fact, those markets have consecutively gained for the last 6 trading weeks. It's been one of the longest winning streaks in 2024. 14% of S&P 500 companies reported earnings. 79% of those were actually a beat to street expectations. So there's some excitement, some euphoria on back of the earnings season in the US. 1/5 of the S&P 500 companies will be reporting numbers this week. So markets will closely, or traders closely, will track earnings. Along with that, the run-up to the presidential elections and geopolitical stress continues to be an important trigger driving risk on trade. A quick check on how crude is doing this morning. Remember, it has declined 7% last week. A number of factors there, right? Chinese economy slowing, move towards greener energy, along with that OPEC reviewing its demand outlook. and maybe the markets coming to terms with what's happening geopolitically led to crude prices easing off quite sharply. Surprisingly, gold traders haven't come to terms with what's happening geopolitically, on back of which gold continued to surge and may cross record highs of 2,700, which is a significant level in terms of gold prices. So that's what we have in terms of crude, gold, Asian markets and Wall Street. Our markets, of course, dancing to their own tune, looking as muted can get. We do have Jonathan Barrett, who should be joining us soon, but we're awaiting his arrival in a few minutes. But just before I'm handed over to Agam for what is happening, what we could be setting ourselves up for this week, a quick check of how trade recapped last week. It was not a fun week of trade. In fact, it's a third straight week of losses for our markets. The bulls did fight back on Friday, and that could be something to take heart from. We did close above levels of 24,850, which has been a critical level of support coming in for the index. So that was well defended by the bulls in trade. Like Agam pointed out, the VIX has cooled off, but despite that, you're not seeing conclusive one-directional move in terms of trade. Well, after Friday's surge, the good news was that the Nifty only ended with cuts of 0.2 to 0.4% on the Nifty and the Sensex. Broader market underperformance continues to, of course, impact the way the markets have been doing. Bank Nifty was the star of last week, up about 1.5% for the week. Gains were led by HDFC Bank for good enough reason, and ICICI Bank as well. Axis announced earnings. Street was impressed, turned out to be the top gainer in the banking pack, gaining about 6% towards close. Apart from that, because of China's stimulus of $100 billion, commodity prices on the LME have gained, on back of which metal stocks made quite a sharp recovery in trade. One stock that stood out on the index on back of earnings or commentary that didn't impress was Infosys, which lost about 4% in trade. Wipro, on the other hand, while earnings met street expectations, markets took heart from the fact that they had a bonus issue. The counter gained about 4%. Consumption has been a weak spot for the markets. Earnings as well with Nestle was slightly disappointing, and that continued to keep the gains in check for the FMCG space. In fact, the FMCG index has ended at its lowest level since August 2024. Another sector that saw some movement was City Gas. Those companies slipped after the APM gas allocation. In fact, some of those counters were down over 15% in trade. So that was what happened on Friday. As we closed our last week, the long-short ratio of FPS has also dropped, with long positions reducing to 33.57%. FIs, remember, have been on persistent selling spree. They've sold for the last 15 trading days in the month of October, offloading 80,000 crores worth of stock. In fact, this has been the longest or the most FIs have sold in our markets since the March 2019 pandemic. So all in all, it was not a great week. We seem to be on slippery slope. The bulls have been struggling. The trading range as well, Agam, is moved slightly low, with 25,000 now becoming 24,850.
Yeah, it's actually very interesting that you mentioned that, Samina, because, we have a confluence of not just technical factors, but also the way a lot of traders are positioning themselves in the options market. So if you actually consider the way things are panning out for the Nifty specifically, on the lower end, firstly, you have your previous low, that is the low that you made on Friday. That's around 24,567. Your puts maximum open interest stands at around 24,500. And your 50-day simple moving average is also just short of the 24,500 mark. So it does seem like 24,500 mark could be a little bit of a near-term support at the moment, and a relatively stronger one. On the higher end, we do have a lot of writing around the call options of 25,000, but we also have a 4-day high of 25,200, as well as your 7-day weighted volume average. That's around somewhere between this range. So I'd reckon that it'd be a 200-point range between 25,000 and 25,200, which will serve as your near-term resistance on the higher end. Again, it's a very narrow range, considering we're used to so much volatility, but we must remember that VIX has also come off. And this is especially going into earnings season, where we have a whole host of very large cap names coming out with earnings, which could potentially influence the Nifty 50. So that's something that we need to keep an eye on. At the moment, of course, watching out for 25,000 in the immediate term. And, naturally, a lot of your large cap banks will influence the way the Nifty moves today, Samina.
Yeah, it's going to be important. In fact, you've had the whole bunch of banking earnings, and HDFC Bank has actually impressed the street with the reporting. The management also sounding fairly confident. That could explain why the markets have been getting excited about the counter even all through last week of trade. But of course, the SAR point for the markets continues to remain foreign investors that continue to flee this market. You, of course, had some relief coming in on the LME and that led to metals doing quite well on Friday. The question now is whether or not the rally continues into trade as we go into this week. But 24,850 becomes important on the downside. It could be another morning of consolidation where 25,000 now, which was a key level of support at the early part of last week, becomes an important resistance that the bulls will try to take out. But of course, the biggest story this week is going to be NDTV Network that takes a giant leap with its formal launch of its new channel, NDTV World Prime. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will inaugurate the channel and offer his thoughts on how this is indeed India's century. The NDTV network has grown from strength to strength, offering the best in unbiased and thoughtful journalism. The NDTV World Summit, which kicks off in Delhi, will be graced by dignitaries from across the seas. Former British Prime Minister David Cameron, Bhutanese Premier Dasho Teshring Topgoy, pardon me if I've got that wrong, market guru Mark Mobius, Nobel laureate Paul Romer, and our very own External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and Sunil Bharti Mittal of Airtel, amongst others. Neeraj and Tamanna are at the event and giving us a quick heads up of what we can expect.
Yeah. Hi guys. We're really excited about the day that we're going to be seeing here. And 4 prime ministers, including one former prime minister, one Nobel laureate, the who's who of the corporate world, and of course, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. So it's a power-packed lineup. And what's exciting, Neeraj, is the diversity of conversations we're going to hear over the next 2 days, starting off, of course, with the Prime Minister's address.
Yeah, and the audience as well. Some very powerful names from corporate India and the political circles gracing the audience to Tamanna. But you're right. I mean, I saw a post from Prime Minister Modi on X, right, which we put out, of course, wherein he's talking about how India is taking rapid strides and remains the bright spot. And really, that is the thing, because so many questions about whether world economies can sustain the growth, and if India can actually do that, then we certainly remain the unequivocal force where money will chase, never mind what's happened in October thus far.
That's just, I agree with you. One small part of it, FII is rebalancing towards China. Perhaps if you keep that aside, what a time to hold a World Summit and launch NDTV World. India is literally, in that sense, at the center of the world.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that unabashedly. Whether you look at a demography which is actually going to grow, China's one-child policy has put them behind on that. We're now the most populous country, and it's now a good thing, not a bad thing anymore. If you look at where we are in terms of relations with all major powers across the world, we're really well placed.
Yeah, we are. And yesterday, Tamanna, a few folks who have come in for the summit, first time in India, etc., without getting into names, they were amazed at the tech stack that we've built. They were, it was like a kid in a candy shop for them, looking at all that India is doing and all the possibilities that lie ahead. So quite stunning and quite riveting some of the conversations promised to be. What are you looking forward to the most?
I'm looking forward to my conversation with Sunil Bharti Mittal. I'm looking forward to hearing from the Prime Minister first up, definitely. But I think even the fact that we're speaking to startup founders, we're speaking to corporate India, we're speaking to women leaders, and of course, a whole host of film stars were also going to be coming and speaking. So that's always fun to listen to. I'll tell you one which I'm really looking forward to. I'm looking forward to hearing from William Dalrymple. He is a historian, and I'm a huge fan. I listen to his podcast all the time. So shout out to anyone who follows him, because he's going to be here as well. Nas Daily is going to be here, and he's huge as a disruptor, as a digital creator. So what a lineup we have. Yeah,
it's exciting across age brackets, across spheres, and certainly look forward to this for sure. I mean, the coverage, of course, on markets continues spot on our channel, but expect a lot of cut-ins and a lot of very important conversations from the NDTV World Summit right here on all of the NDTV network channels and digital media handles. And with this, it's back to you guys.
Neeraj, Samina, we miss you both in the studios, but of course that's a lot more exciting. We'll keep cutting across to both of you and the much talked about Global Summit that kicks off anytime now. But of course, that's the big story, and you can catch cut-ins of that summit on the channel exclusively from 11 a.m. today. In the meantime, we'll do a quick detour and come back to what's happening globally. It is seeming like it's a little bit of decoupling. I mean, Indian markets are behaving a little bit like crude. They've been under pressure and charting their own territory in the last couple of weeks. Jonathan Barrett, Chief Investment Officer, ETO Markets, now joins in. Jonathan, hi, good morning. Thanks for joining in. I believe you've been away for the last few days, so it's great to have you on the channel this morning. Crude, let's start with that. It's down 7% last week. This is despite the fact that there is still some concerns around geopolitical stress, which is evident with the way gold has been performing. What is keeping the tap on crude? OPEC, China? I mean, we've also got a big bumper cookie coming in from China, but despite that, crude doesn't find support.
That's correct. Good morning. Look, it is a bit of a quandary because we have as you mentioned, the geopolitical concerns which are out there. But I think really the market's focusing on the economic performance. Remember last week we had some pretty, I guess, negative numbers out of the States in terms of the economy. China's continuing to stumble along, but we had some data last week as well from China that indicated things were still slowing down. So I think the market's really sort of set on economic performances rather than geopolitical and rather than weather events. So I guess whilst we're seeing that, we're under pressure, but we are coming to an area which is major support for oil. So I guess we'll have to see whether or not it holds up from here.
Yeah, in that case, what do you think is the bias, or where does the bias sit on crude prices?
With Brent, I think it's actually around about that 70, 71. And I think that to me is a major area. We've spent a lot of time down here. This is the lower end of the range. And I think if we do hold here, then we've got a trajectory which is not going to be too kind to a lot of our Indian friends that need oil. But at the end of the day, I do think it'll spend time going sideways. Remember, OPEC have said that they're happy to put more supply into the market if needed, but at these levels, I don't think they will. So I think around this 70 area is quite important for the market, and then we'll just have to see what happens from there.
Jonathan, if you can actually elaborate that point on OPEC a little bit more, what is their current thought process in terms of production, and what's the underlying sentiment at the moment?
Look, I think OPEC's quite happy to sit there at the moment. Remember, this is their balance area. Around that 70 to 75, they're quite comfortable with that price action. Naturally, they'll want to see it higher through that 80 and higher. But I think they're quite comfortable here. If it does get higher, they'll come back out and say, we'll put more supply into the market. If it doesn't, then I think you'll find that the rhetoric will, if the price breaks below this 70, then I think you'll find the rhetoric will actually start to change from OPEC, because anything below that, it does start to hurt them a little bit, and they need those US dollars. So I think if anything, OPEC's out there, the rhetoric is still steady as she goes. If it goes up, we're going to supply more. But if it starts to break through that 70, that's a pretty major area. And if it does break that, I think you'll find some of the rhetoric will change.
Jonathan, what's happening in gold? 2,700 has gotten taken out. The reason there, of course, is geopolitical stress and uncertainty. Where do you see gold prices towards year end? And would you consider recommending a long trade on gold even at current levels?
Rami bhai, 8 at 3.